Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, John Middlekauff, his podcast at the volume is 3 and Out. A former NFL scout. People love him. I was at a party 2 nights ago. And I said, I worked at the volume. Some guy kind of knew me, and he goes, hey, I like the Middlekauff guy. And I said, well, so do I. So we have something in common, and I just met you for the first time, and so let's bring him on. We got a lot of stuff, a lot of ground to cover on this. I want to start with this. It's an interesting one, not that it is that important. But because I have a place in Chicago, John, and I love Chicago. I could live in Chicago. I probably wouldn't want to live there December, January, February, but I love Chicago. My wife loves it. And so I know a lot of media people there. So the other day, I've always found this funny that to some regard, you and I are information brokers. We get information and it changes all the time. And then I give it to the audience when I get it. So I had been told about 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, and Caleb Williams' dad had done some talking. He's a big personality about some things he wanted, and Caleb started getting kind of a entitled rep, and I think Caleb probably told his dad, hey, can you chill a little? Yeah. So I'd said something on the air. I don't think Caleb's in love with Chicago. I don't think they really want to go there. Caleb's people reached out to me and said, hey, we don't want to be painted like that, first of all. We know we're not going to do an Elway. Like if we get picked, we're going to make it work. And I think that's the right attitude to have. That said, I was told USC has been called by 5 different NFL teams doing background checks. People are going to make offers to the Bears. So let's start from that premise. Would you be surprised if multiple teams didn't call the Bears and make offers, big packages?
100% they're going to get offers. I think under no circumstances there's not an offer unless you view the gap between the next guy as borderline, like minuscule. You could not take him. Like you have no choice. Now, listen, scouting's in the eye of the beholder, right? It's not objective. It's not black and white. There are people that view quarterbacks. I mean, there are going to be some teams that have a quarterback that goes 3rd or 4th in this draft that might be their favorite quarterback. Right. So there's no guarantee. I
know a team that loves Bo Nix, not Caleb level, but they think he's the second best quarterback in the draft.
Well, Caleb, part of the reason why he's such a fascinating prospect is because of his physical skills. What did the Bears just do? They hired Shane Waldron, who is a Shanahan McVay. It's a very quarterback friendly. So you could argue, well, if Washington or the Raiders, someone's throwing the farm at you, we don't have to move back that far, especially with Washington. What if Washington said, hey, we want to move up one spot? They play it pretty easily. Like, we're open for business. We're open to listening to anything. We'll give you the following year's number 1. You just move back one spot. You still get the quarterback you want or you're willing to take, and you get an extra first-round pick. In that offense, I'm telling you, did you read the Jets story about the Saleh and everything going on?
Yes.
One thing I was told is when Robert Saleh interviewed for the job, is one of their big pitches, he brought LaFleur's brother with him, who came from Kyle, is that in this offense, there are 60, 65 plays a game. We want to run it for over half. That's the Shanahan way. And then let's say there are 25 to 30 pass attempts. Ideally, half, if not 20 of those 30 pass attempts are going to be schemed, easy passes. Then I'm going to need the quarterback to make 10-ish plays. Josh Allen has to make 30 of those. Mahomes has to make a lot. In this offense, it's very quarterback friendly. So you could argue, go with the Drake May, go with whoever your favorite quarterback is, and add the picks. Now, I would not do that. I think the risk of having a guy with this much talent, I watched some Drake May. Maybe I watched a bad stretch, like 3 straight games in the middle of the year. I was like, God, I thought he was supposed to be like Justin Herbert. I'm not quite seeing this. Bo Nix, listen, I don't know. Jaden Daniels, I have the Arizona bad taste in my mouth from years ago. You got to adapt. I haven't watched him enough, but he's clearly a guy a lot of people like. But I'm with you. I think that I knew people at Oklahoma And the Caleb Williams dad thing was a really big deal when he was 18. Obviously, then he
Yeah,
transferred.
yeah.
You don't get to call Andy Reid, Kyle Shanahan, Belichick, and Pete Carroll and expect them to pick up your phone when you're a father or mother. All right. This is the big leagues.
Right.
That's why they pay you the money. But I think Caleb made the right decision. Like, you want to stop that because there are already some question marks. This is not Andrew Luck when you're like, this is really, it can't be. Like, he
No,
did have the thing on his fingernails and, his play. He's a really good prospect, but it was a little up and down at moments.
yeah.
He can have the hero ball syndrome. There are legitimate questions, which for every prospect except like 5 in the history of sports, there are going to be some question marks.
Well, and I think it's and I went on Chicago radio for a couple stations. Again, I want to be friendly. Chicago's a place I spend a lot of time, and I have real respect for Chicago media. It's New York, LA, Chicago, Dallas, Boston. There's some really good media. I mean, there's some really big market media that I have a lot of respect for.
It's an elite sports city.
Oh, it's. I mean, the teams are a mess, but come on, it's big, loud, passionate.
Yeah.
It's great, and it's my favorite big city in the country. But I do think sometimes you can live in a tunnel, and there is a sense. I think there's a greater perception of the Bears. One of their bragging points is, we lost a lot of close games. Well, shit. Mostly in this league, unless you're awful, everybody loses close games. But I try to implore to them, guys, if you were Caleb Williams, think about this. Brett Favre had 8 years in Green Bay. Some of those when it was a run-first league, 8 times in Green Bay, once in Minnesota, 30 touchdown passes or more. Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay had 8 of those. Jordan Love in his first year starting had 1. 17 times with those 3 quarterbacks, 30 touchdowns or more. The Bears have never had a quarterback that's done that, ever. And they've had 13 coordinators offensively in 26 years. It is an S show offensively. So don't be shocked if the dad 8-9 weeks ago I had heard from the camp, like, they're not in love with this place. And again, dad saying one thing, son saying another. But I just think people will use this example. Well, the Bengals were bad and then Joe Burrow. And to that I say, Kenny Anderson got to a Super Bowl. Boomer Esiason got to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow got to a Super Bowl. Carson Palmer was fantastic, 3-time Pro Bowler. And Andy Dalton.
Marvin Lewis had some really good teams.
I think went to 5 playoffs. So it's like 5 times Cincinnati's gotten the quarterback right. Chicago never has. So for anybody that thinks everybody in Caleb's camp is, we can't wait. There are reservations. They're not, if they get picked, they're going. But this place in the history of the league, the worst offensive franchise, is the Bears. They've never had a 4,000-yard quarterback.
I don't think what people understand is, and I knew Matt Nagy really, really well, and I had some other buddies that work in the organization. It's a mom and pop operation.
Like the
Just
Lakers.
because, so if you think about the first 2 picks, you got the Bears and then you got Washington. Well, what's Washington? This new rich guy who is a big progressive thinker, who's willing to be on the forefront of everything. No expense is too small for him he'll be aggressive. He'll do whatever. If Dan Quinn doesn't work in a couple years, they'll pivot. Exactly. Hey, Cliff, we'll double your salary. What do you do? Doc Rivers, Nick Nurse. If now Embiid's hurt, he'll be aggressive to do something else. The Bears are the complete opposite. Like they romanticize about the 85 Bears. It's 2024, guys. I mean, there's a large gap between those 2 teams. Right. So I don't think people quite, just because it's a big brand and a big city, they do not operate like Kroenke or Jerry or Jeffrey Lurie or now this 40. They don't have the money. They're a team that bought the franchise a long, long time ago. So listen, and I heard you say this, and it's so correct. If they were to start with all this momentum this offseason and these picks, what if they start 0-3 or 2-5? Like Eberflus is got first coach fired written all over him.
Well, yeah, and people say, well,
I thought it was crazy, Colin, to bring him back with all the options on the open market. Given you got the number, this was the time to pivot. And it's classic organization. They're wired like the 70s and 80s. It's insane. I thought it was a mistake.
People say, well, why is Washington?
Nothing against the guy. He had a good second half defensively, but come on.
And again, people say, well, why do you like the Washington space for, blank quarterback? And my takeaway is because Dan Quinn and his staff, they're going to pay elite money to get an elite staff and he can go 1-5 his second year. He's not going to get fired.
Yeah.
So
probably got a 6-year contract.
Yeah. So I think sometimes, and I don't blame Chicago, you're taking local calls. Once you move in a market and live in a market, you do kind of root for your local team because it makes your sportscast, your show more interesting. But I do think the idea that, and Caleb's going to go to the Bears if they pick him, but not everybody. I mean, Caleb's done a good job to say, guys, there's a way to work here. It's like Houston, defensive coach. But again, D'Amico came in with a new staff, a 5-year contract or 4-year contract. The bottom line is 5 games into Eberflus and Caleb Williams, they could be moving on to another staff or at least want to. Anyway.
We wouldn't have this opinion if they would have got rid of Eberflus and hired Vrabel with Arthur Smith. We'd be like, God, that's a viable franchise now.
Absolutely different. Totally different ball game. I have nothing against Eberflus, but I have 2 executives in the league who know him or have interviewed with him. And they're like, listen, he doesn't capture the room. There's an argument to be made. He's a great coordinator. Verdict's out if he's a great coach. But that's okay. It's just the point being is I've got some good sourcing on Caleb, and he's a good kid. He's emotional. He's all about winning, and he's going to go to Chicago. But I mean, you got to take a deep breath if you are a Bears fan or live in Chicago. This is the worst franchise in the league historically on offense. They do not have a 4,000-yard quarterback ever, which is
crazy.
Hard to do. Like the league wants you. The league basically is the opposite college football. They want parity. They don't want Mahomes dominating the league. It's just Mahomes is great.